Huang and Haojun Guo, I think, maybe, on the identity construction of language teachers in online teaching in Ontario. So whenever you're ready, feel free to begin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you'll have 15 minutes for the presentation and 5 for questions and answers. And feel free to add your questions in the chat during the presentation if you want to make sure you remember, and we'll revisit them after the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ria. My presentation is about the identity construction of an ESL teacher in online teaching in Ontario during the COVID-19 pandemics. I'm Zhi Huang. I'm a postdoc fellow in CTL in OAC, University of Toronto. And my co-author is Haojun Guo, and she's not here right now. I will present on behalf of her. First, the background. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemics forced widespread K-12 school closure in the spring of 2020 and the spring of 2021 in Ontario. The teachers needed to transit to unfamiliar modes of teaching and connect to students in different ways. Many teachers are challenged to quickly to learn the new technologies, but they also experience the most traumatic and transformative event. And there is a need to research and document the major shifts in teaching practices and teachers' responsibilities. And for this research, the question is, what is the construction of an ESL teacher's identity during the online teaching in the pandemics? And what is her transitional experiences during this pandemic? And there is the situation of the COVID-19 created new challenges for teachers in the workplace. So to understand how teachers deal with these new challenges, it is argued that we will examine how they form themselves, like identities, in relation to the ways of inhabiting roles, positions, and cultural imaginations. And so the literature review involves the teacher identity, and especially the language teacher identity in education change. And there is a common thread that runs through this studies that the teacher need to reconstruct their identity to cope with new challenges in the workplace. And this process is very complex, involving institutional construction and personal construction of identities, according to Sri in 2007. And there are 3 layers of constructing teachers' identities. The first one is they construct their identities as reflective practitioners. And second one is they construct their identities from interaction with students. And the third layer is they construct their identities from interacting with colleagues. And there is a research gap is that there is the lack of the empirical research on the construction of teachers' identity and experiences in COVID-19 pandemics. And this research has a theoretic framework based on Connolly and Clendenin's 3-dimensional space. That is, the teacher's narratives has a time dimension that is from the past to present and to the future. And second dimension is interaction. It means we will look into the teacher's relationship between her own individual and the society. Last one is the place. The specific school or school board that's the teacher stay in. And also I use the positioning theory to help us in this research, Davis and Harris positioning theory. There are two dimensions. The first one is the self-reflective positioning, and the second one is interactive positioning. For this research, we used the narrative inquiry, because narrative inquiry is the study of people in relationship with people, places, and things by researchers who themselves are in relationship with people, place, and things. And narrative inquiry is very suitable for inquire teachers' experiences and identities. We use this for three folds. As we know, it's teacher stories or story of teachers, and also we use narrative as a method of data analysis. And the last reason is we use this methodology can be described as a narrative inquiry in ethnography. We look at one teacher's identity experiences. And the participant of this research is a teacher named Isabella, and it's a pseudonym. She's a female English as a second language teacher who masters 3 foreign languages with 6 years of teaching experiences as a ESL teacher and 3 years experiences as a mainstream teacher in a public school in a big city in Southern Ontario. Isabella completed an undergraduate degree in education after being a translator in travel agency for 10 years. And this study examines her professional life experience and her identity construction in transition between the remote teaching and the in-person teaching, as well as from teaching ESL to teaching as a mainstream teachers during the COVID-19. The data connection is through email exchanges and artifacts like her schedules, her lesson plans, and the email communication between Isabella and the first author. Also, we have several rounds of semi-structured individual interviews via Zoom. We conducted interviews in different time frame, like in May, September, December of 2020, and February, March in 2021. Every time the interview is like 1 hour to even 2 hours. And she reflected on her online or in-person classroom experiences, challenges, and puzzles, and gaining from the teaching. And when do the data analysis, we follow the narrative inquiry methodology. We divided into 4 stages. First stage is making sense of the narratives. We read the interview transcripts and make notes of the interesting points. The second stage is coding for the themes. We assign the small chunk of narratives data to emerging codes and identify the broader theme for retelling her story. And in stage 3, we reconstructing the narratives from a storyline. And stage 4 is telling and retelling, living and reliving. We have Isabella to read her own stories and discuss with us. And what is our findings? Very excited part. In the first phase of implementation of the emergency remote teaching back in March to June 2020, Isabella said, I would educate my colleagues about the ESL world. And she makes she tried her best to make the task durable. She said I want to make the resources easy enough for students to do it independently, because her student the whole process. Oh, okay. So I've added something before telling a story. The whole process was finally developed into 3 stories reported in this paper. The first story tells Isabella's experiences when she first transited to remote learning in spring 2020. The second one illustrates her positioning strategies in different situations over the course of 4 semesters in 2020, when she became a mainstream teacher. The last story recounts a critical incident that leads to her leaving this profession. So in the first phase of the remote teaching, she had 6 ESL students who cannot read very much English, so she cannot just send things to them online to read. Although Isabella doesn't like virtual teaching, she tried her best to do lots of work to make the task doable for the students and to create a variety of learning in remote teaching. So she said, it means a lot of work on her part. The first thing she was making is to make sure everything she posted was the same format. And she learned a lot of software programs and making the Word documents with typed text and empty lines and make it editable. And she always tried her best because it's her personality. And also the board didn't ask her to do that, but her colleagues and her created one location. It is online location on WhatsApp for themselves. She said for the entire 3.5 months, from March to June, the WhatsApp was being utilized as a key component to communicate clearly what's happening with the board and what's happening with the union and with the government and with the resources. And after 2 months of the remote teaching, the first also invited Isabella to attend an online seminar. Actually, it is this conference, CRLL, the first conference last year. I invited her to attend it, and she emailed me after she listened to Dr. Jin Cummings' presentation. She said, "I would like to educate my colleagues about the realism about the ESL word. I will help them recognize the length of time that is required to learn academic English, as well as how better to reach our ELLs, regardless of age and background experiences." That is the first part. And then in the second phase of the in-person teaching as a mainstream teacher in September in 2020. Actually, Isabella was one of the 12 teachers who got deployed. And she was assigned to teach grade 4 as a mainstream teacher in a nearby school because she's on the bottom of seniority, and none of her previous school teachers wanted to leave and teach remotely. So her experience was crazy in September. She said last June 2020, she was an ESL teacher with the expectation that she would continue to teach ESL in her school. However, on September 1st, she found out she was no longer going to be at her school. And the board didn't know what she was going to do. So for 20 days, she was doing nothing. She didn't know how to prepare because she was got assignment. On September 21st, she was told that then she's going to teach grade 4, and that's it. So she was not. She said the board did a very poor job of creating a work environment for both students and teachers. And the month of September was crazy for her on many, many levels. And for a normal situation, in May, the teachers will know their assignment for next school year. And so it's a big challenge for her. It's a big change for her. And she said, I just like becoming a brand new teacher again, because I don't have the resources easily. I don't have them from last year. And I have to reinvent the wheel because we no longer have the textbooks. Frustrated by that.
So if you could get to your conclusion here, you have about 1 minute left in your presentation time.
Okay, and she felt isolated to teach grade 4 because she's the only one who teach grade 4 in that new school, and then back in January she has to teach the remote teaching again, and she found that it was all about surviving, and she made decision to leave because she has a lot of pressure from the work and from the families, and the discussion is from her narrative you can find that she positioned herself as a learner and a reflective practitioners. She tried to use the new technology. And secondly, she positioned herself as a decision maker when interacting with students. She makes sure the resources online become alive for students. She connected students rather than connect to the curriculum. And she positioned herself as a collaborator with colleagues. She has a supporting teacher to help her to do the breakup rooms to reach individual students who are weak in English. And she has a Thursday coffee, which is very important social time. It's even more important than the professional life. And when she was the only teacher, had nothing to have a professional dialogue, she feels isolation. And so the further research is we have to pay attention to the public schools with flexibility of delivery modes, and the teacher education program have to serve rapidly growing demands for the online teaching. And also we need to pay more attention to students who are in need. And I conclude with Isabella's words. She hoped all people involved in education have rethink the importance of good education, how we prepare ourselves to face the global challenges of the future. That's all. Thank you for listening.
Great. Thank